until bigger ships came with more aid who could bring more. From the outside, find a way to break into the concentration camp and create this opening, this passage between the Palestinians in Gaza and the rest of the world. There's 25 military vessels kind of surrounding, and then eventually...
About 25?
There was about 40 and coming from all directions. I was instantly grabbed, thrown onto the ground, face down on the asphalt. People stepped on the back of my head, had my arm ripped up like out of the socket. There's something about the imagery of looking out at the horizon and then the idea of people coming in boats to try to break open the siege and contribute in some very small way towards Palestinians liberating themselves and creating a better future. There's something very powerful in that, and we hear that over and over again from Palestinians in Gaza about how important it is that we keep trying. I would say that we're in a unique position to be able to put a little bit of effort and push into our boundaries a little bit to be able to have a very powerful effect on how the future unfolds.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of the Stand For Palestine podcast. Today we bring you a special episode. If you are not aware or haven't heard, recently there was an undertaking by civilians called the Global Sumud Flotilla. This was a group of 500 or so individuals who aimed to get onto boats with aid and sail to Gaza to break the siege. And today I'm very, very honored and blessed to have one of the participants of the Global Sumud Flotilla, Surya McEwen. Welcome to the podcast, Surya.
Thank you, brother. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much for giving us your time. It's a pleasure to have participants of the Global Sumud Flotilla to talk about, I guess, not only the experience of the flotilla and being on the boats and things like that, but also what it means, and also, I guess, to bring it back to the experience of the Palestinians and why something like this was needed to begin with. So I guess, without further ado, I want to sort of get straight into it. Firstly, Surya, I want to ask you. So, this is not your first flotilla, is that correct?
That's right. I was involved in 2 other missions with the FFC in 2024 and then earlier this year.
Right. And so the first 2 didn't go ahead, but eventually this one did go ahead.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Now, I guess I want to start first and foremost. On this flotilla, when did you first hear about it? Like, when did you first want to get involved with it?
So the flotilla missions have been going for a long time. Obviously, your audience would know that since the blockade in 2008, Gaza has basically been a concentration camp. And the naval blockade has actually gone for a lot longer, but it was strengthened and solidified by the IOF at that time. And so the Free Gaza movement was taking boats since 2008. Then a couple of years later, that solidified into the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, which was just organizations from different countries around the world coming together as one group to do this, basically to be bringing aid by sea as a fundamental mission, but also to be trying to break the siege and break open that blockade as a political tactic as well. It involved different... I have a brother who was involved in one of the missions, which was the opposite. Like, the framing of bringing aid is problematic, even though it's useful as a tool. But there was the request, like, why not bring things from Palestine? Like, we have artisans, we have people creating all of these products, but the blockade also means that we can't access the world. So there was one mission, Gaza Arc, in 2012, I believe, where comrades went into Palestine and were connecting with people who were trying to get products out into the world, and that boat was like bringing products out. So it's operated in different ways. I was involved as a Palestine solidarity activist, fundraising for them in the past, but in terms of becoming more deeply involved and getting on a ship and like joining the missions in that way, that happened early last year.
Awesome. And I mean, before we talk a little bit more in depth about what the flotilla was and what its aims were and, things moving forward, I want to ask you, when did you get into activism for Palestine? Like, what sort of got you into activism for Palestine?
On some level, being Indian and Irish, my heritage on both sides was deeply involved in decolonial struggle against empire, And so I was kind of born into it on one level. But in terms of becoming self-aware as a human being and involved in struggles, I'd say in my mid-teens, I remember reading something in the earlier days of the internet, being at school, accessing the internet, or at a friend's house that had a computer or whatever. Remember before there was like good websites for political analysis, there was like collections of, there was a thing called ZNet. I don't know if you remember ZNet. It was like basically mostly American, but also some European and other like English-speaking journalists putting up their articles. Yep. I read an article by Dr. Ramzi Baroud, who's amazing, from the Palestine Chronicle. That was, I believe it was an early article that was part of his writing for the book My Father Was a Freedom Fighter, which is an amazing book that he wrote about his family history in Palestine. And that definitely touched me in a certain way and like solidified my the political understanding of Palestine, as well as reading Chomsky and like Chris Hedges and some other kind of key figures around that time. And that made me get involved in political solidarity in subtle ways. I lived in a very small area when I was young, so there wasn't a lot happening in terms of political activism. It was actually a few years later, during the week before the invasion of Iraq, I gathered some friends and I kind of set up this protest in our small town in Mullumbimby at the high school. So we like made up these flyers and got them to everyone in the school, and got some buses to come from other schools, and we did this kind of quite big protest. And I think that was the first moment that I realized the capacity for like one person or a few people to just kind of go, oh, this is totally messed up. Like, this is unacceptable. This thing that's happening, we have to find some way to do something to try to stop it. And obviously that didn't work. We couldn't stop the invasion of Iraq, but realizing the power of small actions to kind of be involved in politics, that moment was crucial for me. Then later on, when I moved to Brisbane to study, the year later, I connected with Justice for Palestine Brisbane and some very amazing activists there, and became more involved.
Amazing. So you've been involved, if I'm right, and I don't want to reveal your age, but you've been involved in Palestinian activism, 20 plus years?
Yeah. Actually, we had a beautiful moment, if you don't mind me relaying. I used to be an MC. I would like go on rap at protests and like do little poems and things like that. And I remember we were reminiscing about the first one that I went to with brother Phil Mansour from Brisbane, who's an amazing Palestinian activist and musician. And I was performing with him at Queen's Gardens, which is this place where the protests start in Brisbane. And it would have been in 2002, I believe, Second Intifada. We were making music at the rally, and there was probably like a handful of people that were involved in organizing it, and there was 8 people in attendance at the rally. And a couple of weeks ago, before I left on this mission, we were in the same place. He was performing the same song, I believe, that he was performing then, amazing. And there was 70,000 people singing along to the songs, and it was a beautiful moment. It's too little, too late, and it's horrible that the uprising has taken so long, given the horror that's happening. But I think we have to take the little wins as well, and that was a beautiful moment.
Absolutely, I think resistance in any form can take many forms, and it's sometimes the small actions that have that can make the biggest movements. Now, So you've been involved in activism for a long time. This is not your first flotilla. Talk to me about the Global Sumud Flotilla, because this is the one that was, I think, it's the biggest flotilla that has ever tried to break the siege on Palestine. And it was probably, obviously, the most well-known that we've sort of seen, other than when the activists were killed on the Mavi Marmara in the early 2010s. So tell me about, I guess, what was the atmosphere like when you guys were preparing to leave? What was the emotion and the feeling of the activists that were there? What type of activists were there?
So the Global Sumud Flotilla is a new attempt to break the siege, to gather as many people as possible from the broadest from the broadest representation across the globe. The FFC, like the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, has done missions with more people and from more places as well. So it's not a new thing in that sense. There's been missions with lots of boats before, but there's something about the intensity of the Holocaust right now and also the strength of the global uprising around it that means that the attention of the world is on these movements in a way that maybe they weren't in the past when similar things were happening. Also, the fact that we took 50 boats, smaller boats, operating in this way that was more difficult to challenge through bureaucratic warfare. If you have bigger boats, it's easier to kind of get the US to pressure the nation that has the flag to remove it, to undermine the mission. So it was definitely historic in the sense of taking 50 ships, 50 vessels to try and break the siege, which is also more difficult for them to stop when you get closer to the shores of Gaza. We gathered in different places, so it was people from 50 different nations and 50 boats. Some of them were based in Spain, some of them were based in Tunisia, some of them were based in Italy, and some of them were based in Greece. And then others came from other places as well. I was stationed in Sicily. I was part of the group coordinating the action leaving from Sicily. And there's something that happens with any there's something that happens with any sort of political struggle. Anytime that you're gathering with people for a purpose that is beyond yourselves, that is beautiful. You see the glimpses of a type of humanity that maybe you're not used to in your day-to-day life, or that is rare in the society that we live in. Somehow, when it comes to Palestine, that feeling is accentuated. It's even stronger. Because, as you know, for those of us involved in this struggle for years or decades, often, especially in a place like Australia, in settler colonial countries, even in English-speaking countries in general, and in other places that have some sort of co-optation or connection with Israel, there is a dehumanization around the struggle, and there is a lack of widespread understanding of Palestinian humanity. That means that no matter what you're doing, you're always sort of cast to the side. The struggle is undermined in quite strong ways, and it has been in Australia in really strong ways. So it's always a little bit of a thing of if you find your people who understand the importance of Palestinian humanity and are willing to put energy towards that, it's a pretty good signifier of someone who's going to be like yourself, who you're going to connect with. And to be in a place where so many people not only feel that way, but feel that way to the extent that they're willing to put their bodies on the line on a boat, quite vulnerable in the ocean, and sail directly into the genocide. There's a very beautiful feeling of humanity in that space, from people who are from all sorts of different backgrounds, racially, religiously, politically, even class-wise. The struggle ties you together in a certain way, and there's a lot of power in that.
I can only imagine. I can imagine even when you get into a protest and there's that sort of the showing of humanity where people are there and they're sort of talking about the same issue, and they're sort of I can imagine. If that's what a protest is like, I can only imagine what it would be like if you were there and, preparing to embark on what is quite a, as you say, treacherous journey, but something that sort of is beyond every one of the people there. So it's quite incredible. But you did mention Australia, settler colonial land. I'm going to come back to it, but what has been the response since you've come back to Australia? What has been the response, I guess, from everyone around you where you've gone? How have you sort of felt the response has been to what you sort of undertook?
Each time I've come back from a mission, it's different. On one level, there's a huge amount of death threats and vitriol from the Zionist community in Australia. Sometimes I come from a small area that is it's become a little bit like Goa or Phuket or something like that, where people do their service and then they go to an area like this to kind of reimagine themselves as hippies or something, to try to humanize themselves. So there's quite a lot of war criminals walking around the community where I live in. And so sometimes those threats are more face-to-face, not just online. But there's that side of things, and then there's
So just to be clear, so people have threatened you in person because of what you've done.
yes. Not in a way that has felt like a legitimate danger to my life. In a way that feels like that you're trying to undermine your commitment to something, or
But it's
trying to
still a
make
threat,
you afraid. It is.
yeah,
It is what it is.
I mean, it's typical. It's not that it's not typical. And as you say, many people involved in Palestinian activism, whether they're white, Arab, wherever they come from, often face threats from Zionists.
And it's worse for the Palestinian organizers in my area where I come from. Some of my closest humans experience. I always have to look under at the wheels of my tire before I leave anywhere if I'm in public, because there'll be like nails or glass or whatever. My close brother up north has experienced like many more things than I have, including having his windows smashed all the time, or constant harassment and violence from the Zionists.
Yeah, it seems to be something that is almost ingrained in how they think and how they act towards anyone that is pro-Palestinian. So I want to ask you a little bit about the interception, right? So you guys are on this flotilla. Actually, before the interception, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had to switch boats because of the drone bombings by the Israeli government that affected your boat. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So the first bombings that happened, the first drone attacks that happened were in Tunis. Two of the main ships were attacked by drones, and then once the Tunisian boats met us south of Sicily, we traveled together toward Gaza. We were in international waters a day and a half later when 14 of our boats were attacked in a drone strike, a drone swarm. Like, there was lots of the quadcopters. 11 of them were hit with explosives, and some of them were hit with devices that bounce into the water, or chemicals that like burned through some of the metal framing of the outside of the ship. The boat that I was on, the Luna Bark, we had an explosion go off about 1.5 meters above our heads. We were all in position. It blew a big hole in the sail. It was a PSYOP operation on one level. They were trying to instill fear among the participants and encourage us to stop the mission, try to undermine the mission. But they were also trying to damage the boats so that we could not carry on with it as well. The Luna Bark in the coming days was decommissioned. It wasn't okay to keep sailing with, but I was able to go on to the Mia, another boat, with some other comrades, and carry on from there.
So you go onto this next boat, the Mia, and you continue the journey. And then how did you guys know you were intercepted or you were about to be intercepted? Was there any comms on the radio, or was it just what happened?
So once we hit 150 nautical miles from the shores of Gaza, that's kind of considered like the orange zone. Mm-hmm. It's about as far out as we would expect them to have any possibility or capacity to intercept us. So you're on high alert from a certain point. It's also the time when some of the boats that were accompanying the mission would stop as well, like the support and the emergency boat, and also the Navy boats that were there as well this time around. And then from that point, we're on high alert. We have a particular security protocol, obviously watching the vessels in the water and in the sky. There was a night soon after that when we got about 120 nautical miles from Gaza, where there were IOF, like Navy vessels among the fleet. And they were the mid-sized ones, like decent-sized ship, but they're not the huge Navy ships, all blacked out, so you can see their outline, but you can't. It's hard to actually see them in the dark. And the main way that we can tell that they're there is because they're the ships that jam the comm. So if you're within half a nautical mile of these particular ships, the internet goes off, your Garmin, AIS tracking, all that stuff is destroyed. And then if you can get further than half a mile away from them, occasionally the internet would come back on. So we'd have at least that communication there. They also had ribs, like the small boats that they would use to bring commandos onto the vessels. So there was a moment the night before that we thought that interception was imminent. It turned out that that was probably an intelligence gathering operation, maybe some psyops as well, testing the equipment we had and these things. But the following night, it was pretty obvious when the moment of the beginning of the interception came. There were, at first there was 12 that we could see on the horizon, and then there was another 12, so it was 25 military vessels kind of surrounding, and then eventually
25.
there was about 40 and coming from all directions. So it was quite obvious the operation had begun, and we were prepared for the next phase. We had 50 boats though, so it was we weren't sure exactly how they were going to handle that particular scenario, because it's quite a logistical problem for them. They ended up hitting some of the lead ships first, and then on like sailboats like the one I was on, we spent the night like ducking and weaving, trying to avoid the military vessels. They're using like water cannons, spraying this weird chemical in the water. And they come up to you and surround you, and they're like, turn off the engine, it's your last chance, and they spray you the water cannons. But we figured out pretty quickly that, actually, maybe I won't talk about too much of the operational stuff.
Yeah,
But we found a way to get away again. We're like getting away from the big military vessel that's trying to ram some boats, but it's also trying to create waves that would tip us over as well. Had this amazing captain, Emilien from France, who was just like so onto it, just like ducking around the big ones, and then getting far enough away that we're sort of out of the range, and then they chase us down again and find a way around them. And it was like 8 hours of, I can imagine what would be some of the most amazing sailing that you can do. I'm not an experienced sailor myself, but it was pretty wild. We were actually the last boat to get intercepted. Like we made it to 26 nautical miles from the shore of Gaza. About 8 hours later from the beginning, and the sun was rising. And they like to do these operations in the dark. They don't like it filmed. They don't want the world to see how they handle these situations. So I had a strong feeling as the sun was rising that we were actually going to make it to shore. I was speaking to some friends on the shore of Gaza who were there waiting for us. But yeah, they came. They got us not long after that.
Yeah. And guys, if you do enjoy our content, if you like the stuff that we're producing, please be sure to like this video and click on the subscribe button. It really does help boost us in the algorithm and helps support our work. Back to the podcast. So I guess I want to take a step back, and I want to actually talk to you about the flotilla's interception, because this was in international waters. This is not under the jurisdiction of so-called Israel.
The way that we set up our missions, and the way that every single Freedom Flotilla mission before it, like the Freedom Flotilla Coalition had done 37 missions before Global Sumud. Global Sumud happened, and then they had another one that followed us like a few days later. So it's been 39 missions altogether now.
Is that the one with Madeleine Habib on it?
That's right. Yep. That's right. Yeah. Yep. And every single one of those missions has the pathway is from international waters directly into Palestinian waters.
Right.
Israel, so-called Israel, has no right whatsoever to be in either of those sets of waters.
That's right.
It's completely illegal for them to be there, let alone act like the force that's responsible militarily for that place in the water. So we were taken from international waters. We were kidnapped by a hostile military, forced against our will into their area of control in occupied Palestine, and then imprisoned by them.
So, okay, so they did this in international waters, but as part of sort of Israel's colonial power and geography, it seems like they refuse to let Palestinians breathe even beyond land. Like, they're not happy taking the land. They even have tried to colonize the seas. Like, how do you interpret those like egregious actions by so-called Israel?
They want to control the land, the resources, the water, under the land, the sea, the sky. They want to control everything so they can take everything.
Yeah.
And they want to expand from where they are into the other countries around them. Like the Greater Israel Project never has firm borders, because the vision of the people who are pushing that want to expand it further and further.
And I mean, what does it mean that Israel sort of extends its policing to international zones as though Gaza is a prison? Like, when you guys were intercepted and you felt like there's nothing that you could do, right? Did you guys sort of start to think, if we're being treated this way, what about the Palestinians? Like the Palestinians not only were blocked from the sea, blocked by the air, blocked on land, but they're getting bombarded. Like when you guys got intercepted, what was sort of, were you guys thinking, I mean, it was probably frightening when you guys got intercepted, but what was going through your minds at that point?
There's every single moment you're involved in a mission like this, you're thinking in those terms
Right.
of like of what's happening to Palestinians on the ground, and no matter what form the struggle takes in a mission like ours, like we're very, very publicly a non-violent humanitarian mission operating in a very carefully calibrated way, the response will always be relatively light towards us because the eyes of the world are on a mission like this in a certain way, and the IOF have to hold back because of that in very certain ways, like the passport privilege that we experience. And even comrades who joined us who don't have passport privilege. There were many people from Malaysia, from Morocco, from Algeria, from places that don't have an embassy within Israel and don't recognize Israel. But there was some protection from them by the collective that they were operating with, because we operate together. And so we were, I don't know if we were afraid. I think we were more disappointed that the mission had been thwarted than afraid of what would come, partly just because there is an understanding that Israel is going to treat us differently than they will treat Palestinians.
So, given that, right, even though you were treated differently, you're on this podcast with your arm in a brace, right, and you had sustained some injuries. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. So when we were taken from the boats onto the port in the place that they call Ashdod Port, there were many. I mean, just for me personally, embarking from the Mia onto shore, there were 30 of the border police there. Most had automatic weapons. They had media there. It was clearly this show of force that they were trying to do as part of their Hasbara, their operation within 48. I stepped onto the pier. I was instantly grabbed, thrown onto the ground, face down on the asphalt. People stepped on the back of my head, had my arm ripped up, like out of the socket. I was raised Hindu. I had like a rudraksha, like a mala around my neck, and they pulled the mala off and threw it on the ground and made this big show of like stamping on it and spitting on the religious symbol. And when I was being held down, they were kicking me from both sides and punching me. And I have one broken rib from that and one cracked rib. And my shoulder's okay, but it was very bruised from being ripped out, and it's taken a bit of time. Then I was dragged for a few hundred meters to an area where they were carrying on this media show where they had us in stress positions. Some people were just sitting with their head facing down, and key people that they were trying to intimidate or use as part of their propaganda. Like Greta was treated terribly. Few of the people who were seen as organizers were treated just horrifically. I was told to sit on my knees and then with my face down so my head's on the floor and not to look up. And if I looked up like slightly, like a centimeter, you can feel the back, like the automatic weapon pressing against the back of your head, and they're yelling at you, calling you a terrorist, saying you're gonna be killed and all this. I was there for about 2 hours in the stress position. After at first you're trying to wiggle your toes and keep your blood flowing because it's an awkward position to lie in. Eventually, after about an hour, I kind of slumped down to the side. I thought maybe the person behind me had gone, and I could kind of rearrange and get comfortable. And as soon as I tried to, I could feel the gun butt against the back of my head again. So I just laid there. We were then taken from that processing place. Also, Ben Gvir came. When we were in the stress positions, they brought Ben Gvir through to kind of call us terrorists.
That famous video where he's running his mouth, is that the one?
I haven't seen the media for this. So
right,
there's two moments. There's another moment later that they did that with him as well. So it could have been either of those. Right. He's just calling us terrorists and stuff. And then eventually we're taken to processing. They ripped up my passport. And I was like, how am I going to, I can't travel, you can't rip up my passport. And they were complain to the UN. Just crazy.
The audacity.
They stole our things, then strip searched, go through this whole process of at immigration. we experienced some things. We experienced some violence. We experienced some sexual violence. We experienced some. Well, eventually, when we were taken to Kitsiot prison in the Naqab, in the Palestinian desert, we were all 100 of us. 100 of the men were like forced into this cage on the outside, designed for probably 20 people or something, like squished into this cage. And Ben Gvir came through and is calling us terrorists. It was nice to call him like a baby killer to his face. And I think at that point, he was under the impression we would either be subdued, like we'd either be afraid, or we would be like vitriolic and easy to look like we were like militants or crazy or something. But we were dignified, we spoke to him, but I think we kind of ruined his moment a bit. That may have been the media moment you were talking about. But just all of the things that we experienced, then in incarceration, they do like a sleep deprivation. They didn't bring us water ever. We were packed into small cells with too many people. They pissed on my mattress so I wouldn't sleep on my mattress.
Wait, one of their soldiers pissed on your mattress?
Yeah, like it was brought to me with like piss on it. They'd have their tactical unit come in with like the dogs and the guns in our faces and stuff constantly. But and they refused medicine. Like there was two elderly comrades who were one from Algeria and one from Ireland who were in like their late 70s and they needed insulin, like life or death situation. They wouldn't bring it. So we rioted for like a day and a half until they took them to get medical care. But all of the things that we experience are like the 5-star version of the treatment. Like Kitsiot is known as a place where the IOF like literally torture Palestinians to death, torture them so much that they are murdered in the process of the torture, and the sexual violence that happens there is unimaginable horror. Like it's a very difficult thing to talk about our experience because on one level you can use words around like abuse and violence, but then on another level it's so light compared to what's normal for someone who's a prisoner there that it's almost not worth talking about. Like if the word Kitsiot prison is going to be used, it should be used in association with Palestinians being tortured to death, often who have never committed a crime, who haven't been charged with a crime, who are there under administrative detention, just stolen from their families in the night and never return. The idea that some Westerners doing some solidarity mission get a little bit hurt in the process, I think is less important if we're talking about that prison, because it's a horror show there.
Did you guys hear any Palestinian prisoners? Did you see any Palestinian prisoners? Like, what was the experience with that?
We, Abu Bakr, another comrade from Australia, spoke about seeing a Palestinian who was tied in the distance. I did not see another. I saw Palestinians who were among us, but I didn't see any Palestinians from Kitsiot prison. We were clearly in an area that they'd like put aside and had ready for us to be taken to. We were in 3 pavilions, like 3 cell blocks, and we could hear Palestinian prisoners screaming in the distance, but they were clearly far enough away that we wouldn't be able to call out to them and speak to them. So yeah, it's a massive prison complex. So we were clearly in an area that was sort of disconnected from the rest.
Wow. I guess talk to me. You said that you had some Palestinian comrades on the flotilla with you. How were they treated?
Worse than anybody else, but also within the confines of pretty much all of us being there, being treated in a way that's different to Palestinians from Palestine who were taken there. As a whole, I was very worried about certain people, especially people with passports of countries who don't recognize Israel, and some other comrades who are organizers or who are maybe in a more vulnerable position in that scenario. But they seemed to treat us collectively about the same, which I was very relieved for. Their hasbara, like their propaganda against the mission at first, they were just calling us openly the Hamas flotilla, the terrorist flotilla, making up all of these lies about like connections to militancy, and they were really setting it up to be able to use extreme violence against us. And then once the global uprising, especially the uprising in Italy, amazing, Blocciamo, Tutti was just incredible. And in other places as well around the world, it was like the world's eyes and the world's hearts were with this mission in a way that wouldn't allow that for them. So then they pivoted they kept calling us terrorists, but then they pivoted more to like the selfie yacht thing, trying to say we actually didn't have aid, or that we're just like virtue signaling or some shit. Like whatever version of trying to undermine it they can do, they'll do. But yeah.
So I'm going to ask you this explicitly, right? And we know the answer to this, but clearly there was no Hamas affiliation with anything to do with the Global Sumud Flotilla. They had a couple of names that they were trying to say were Hamas, but even it seems their reports were fake.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in this little bubble in Australia, in parts of the Western world, where people are it's not even complicity with Israel. Like, people are partners in Israel in this colonial project. Yes. And so the way that our laws and the way that what's acceptable in terms of conversation is set up means that to talk about someone's legal right under international law to defend themselves against a brutal military occupation, which is completely legal, is illegal for us in Australia. And people in countries where it's just normal to talk about reality and it's not illegal to talk about reality can talk about it. So there's people who see the dynamic at play in different ways than would be acceptable here. But in terms of like connections, like it's just complete fabrication.
And I think, like, as you say, the world made it very clear that this was, a complete fabrication. And, people protested, and there was, an uprising. Like, really, there was the scenes in Spain, the scenes in Italy, even in Australia, like the type of, it's much smaller, but still sort of protesting. It was insane. It was crazy. And you could feel the sense of, like, Australians, most Australians now get it. They understood, especially like at the peak of sort of the flotilla, and when, after the interception happened, it really felt like at some point a lot of the Aussies started to get it. But Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong, right, did not say a single word about the interception, about your kidnapping from international waters. Nothing.
Even when we were bombed at sea, they didn't say anything.
Not a single word. A complete, utter silence, which for me is cowardice, right? There's just no backbone in our politicians to speak up for what is right. The ABC interviewed your mother, where she said she was angry that she had not been contacted by the Prime Minister. I don't think even DFAT had spoken to her. And we heard similar frustrations from all the other flotilla activists. Did the Australian government provide any support, any help at all?
Like the Australian government does with Palestine in general, they'll do the absolute least that they can possibly do without facing a serious backlash that could change the direction of things. So we had consular support who spoke to us when we were imprisoned. A few days into being in prison, the consular support from 48 came. They had 10 minutes with 6 of us, and so we didn't really get to speak. I wrote a little note that I asked them to pass on to my mum. In order to be able to do that, they're trying to tell you to sign a document, and part of that document talks about sharing the information with organizations that we trust. And I asked whether that included Israeli intelligence, and they said, we can't say no to that. So I scribbled that part out, but I don't think they take those legal things very seriously. So technically there was some support, and those human beings who came and met us, they were very supportive. But in terms of the DFAT and the government, like doing something meaningfully to support us, it was nothing. And when we were bombed at sea, like there's 500 of us, but the Australians, if we're just talking about that, was 6 Australians on a civilian humanitarian mission. Doing the thing that our government is required under law, under the Genocide Convention that we have signed and ratified, which is, let alone like our actual obligation, which is when there's a genocide or a probable genocide happening, you intervene, you stop it, and you punish the perpetrator. But then beyond that, just bringing aid to people who are being starved to death, like that's a fundamental requirement of all states. At least since the ICJ, the highest court in the world, required that of states. They're not doing that, so we're doing it. We're in international waters, and we're bombed by an ally to try to stop the mission. It is ridiculous. There was no condemnation. They said they blamed the victim. They blamed us. Yes. They said, you shouldn't be in a dangerous part of the world doing a dangerous mission. We're literally in Europe. We're in European waters. Like, we hadn't gotten to what they might say is dangerous waters yet. And we're being bombed, and there was no backlash against Israel. And that is the clearest expression of our partnership with Israel, our government's partnership.
It's more important than your lives, Aussie citizens' lives.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
And so Australia's, as you say, they didn't really say anything about when you were bombed or when you were sort of abducted and kidnapped in international waters. How does that compare to other countries? Did any other countries speak out?
I mean, Turkey sent actual ships, like sent planes into the desert to pick up people to fly them back home while we were still incarcerated. But in terms of government response, and it ties in with the success of the mission in some ways, like when people say, was the mission successful? When we began, we had 30,000 applicants to be on boats. So we had 30,000 people from around the world who applied to put their bodies onto boats to sail into the Holocaust. That makes it a success from the beginning. That shows that the uprising is strong and can and will be built upon. Then the second thing is that a flotilla mission on one level is bringing hope and bringing aid to people who are being starved to death and who don't have medicine, who need it. There's that, like, one part of the point of it. The second part is to open up a humanitarian corridor, to, like, from the outside find a way to break into the concentration camp and create this opening, this passage between the Palestinians in Gaza and the rest of the world. And then we were going to hold it there until bigger ships came with more aid who could bring more. But the mission by itself, like 50 boats at sea, is it's powerful, but the power of the mission is always going to rely on the power of the movements in the places where the people come from. So the uprising in Italy and also in Greece and in Spain, it meant that countries who are firm allies of Israel, Italy and Greece, felt as though they don't want to do anything. They want to be Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong and say some words that mean nothing and act in a way that supports the genocide. That's what they want to do. Even more so, like they're further to the right than these people. They support Israel more than we do even. But the movement was so strong that it forced the government to feel like we have to pretend like we support this mission. So Italy sent a Navy vessel to accompany us. Like, it was misunderstood. They were never there to protect us. They were never there to support us. But the movement was so strong, the government had to act in a way where they were at least pretending to support what we were doing. And that is powerful. That's a powerful thing. Like, they were there to, like, probably share intelligence and do surveillance work for Israel. But just the fact that they were forced to act in this way means that the mission and the movements were so strong that it's opening up this different possibility in terms of the international balance of power, where countries that don't want to act feel like they need to, and then maybe countries that do want to act, like Spain or Turkey, feel like there's more space to act than there would be without that. And that is powerful. Like, that, those responses were a good sign of the success of the mission.
And look, you've eloquated it perfectly, but there's Anthony Albanese, right? While you guys were being held, I want to mention a couple of things that he spoke about while you guys were being held, right? He commented on student debt. He commented on a random attack in the UK, right? Which is sad. Obviously, he commented on the first home buyer deposit. He commented on a rugby league game. But he could not find 5 minutes to talk about Australian citizens that were kidnapped in international waters. I mean, the level of, like, it's just so preposterous to think this is our leader. This is the guy who at one point was part of the Friends of Palestine. Or Friends for Palestine, and he was such a vocal supporter of Palestine. Like, for me, it's like, how do you fall from grace so badly?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't an accident in his scheduling.
Yeah, exactly.
He's in a situation where Bob Carr's been talking about this a bit recently, which is interesting. I don't know if you've seen it in any of his podcasts. As someone who was in the halls of power and also didn't do enough at the time, but at least is elucidating some of the dynamic with Israel. It's really interesting to see the amount of support that we give in Australia to organizations like the AJA, and we give them money and we allow them to operate here freely with charity status. And Israel is given a status within our country that no other country is given, and it's completely against the interest of Australia as a government, as a country, and it makes no sense whatsoever. So anybody from any background, any version of politics, any party that you vote for, I'm sure everybody would agree that it's ridiculous that we're giving support to organizations that are designed to help the interest of a foreign nation at the expense of the interest of ours. And that's unacceptable. And that Anthony Albanese, as the leader of Australia at the moment, is not operating on the basis of good faith in his arguments or on just basic like Aussie ideas of a fair go or common decency or international law or human rights or our obligations under our treaties that we've signed. It's horrific and it's terrible and it's a sign of cowardice maybe, but it's also a sign of the power structure in Australia and how terribly we've allowed things to end up in terms of alliances and partnerships that shouldn't be the way that they are at the moment. As you say, like Anthony Albanese set up the Parliamentary Friends of Palestine. Like he understands the apartheid system in Palestine. He understands that there's a situation going on there for decades that needs to be fought and overcome in the same way as South African apartheid did, and that there is a pathway towards peace and justice and freedom for all of the people in historic Palestine, Jewish people, Muslim people, Christian people, atheist people, but it requires for the apartheid system that they call Israel to be disintegrated and for one democratic state to emerge out of that. But since he's been in a position of power where he could lean and push into making that future possible, his hands have been tied for whatever reason. I don't know whether that's because purely because of cowardice. I don't know if it's because he becomes aware of the levels of power, like the response from the US and the rest of the complicit world, what that will be in the context of doing something like that. Like I don't understand what he's dealing with that makes him appear so weak on something so important. But I'd like to understand, and I'd like to believe that before he leaves office, he could take this historic moment to do something that can transform the possibilities of freedom and peace and justice for Palestinians, but also for people who call themselves Israelis on that land as well. Peace isn't possible for anybody until the apartheid is finished and one democratic state can replace it, for anybody there. And pretending that it's supporting Jewish people to support a genocidal terror state is horrific and inhumane for everybody.
I mean, common sense would dictate that if you genuinely support and want freedom for people, this is not the way to act. And you know, an empty symbolic gesture of recognizing, you know, the state of Palestine is shirking your responsibility. Like if you look at, you know, what Scott Morrison would have done, how much more has Albanese actually done compared to what a Liberal leader would have done? Very little. Like if you really think about the level of inaction from the Labor government. Now, I want to talk to you about what the flotilla was hoping, I guess, what the point of the flotilla was for the Palestinians, right? So, because as you say, you know, the Hasbara was trying to say this is, you know, a selfie boat, and I remember there was some, you know, YouTubers that were making, or whoever influencers, that apparently there was a margarita machine on one of the boats, and they didn't have any aid, and you know, this is all, you know, virtue signaling. I want you to sort of talk to what the flotilla was hoping to achieve for the Palestinian cause. Can you sort of...
So always the flotilla mission has been an attempt to break the illegal siege on Gaza, to break open the concentration camp. And so it's been operations over almost 20 years trying to be the civilian force from around the world that does whatever is possible to break that open. And that involves the physical mission of taking vessels and literally physically breaking it open, but also the political mission of building the support that would make that rupture that we do by sea supported in places all around the world that make it possible to keep that humanitarian corridor open and lead to the disintegration of that horrific policy, like that that concentration camp policy around Gaza.
So while the flotilla may not have broken the siege as was being hoped and opened a humanitarian corridor, uh, I feel that the flotilla probably achieved in other areas more than it would have expected. What would you say to that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the support for this particular mission, the capacity to build what feels like a new internationalism in terms of the movement, and the overlapping threads that have been created that then for the next mission will be even bigger and even stronger. It feels like a hugely successful mission.
Have you received or have you spoken to any Palestinians from Gaza? Or has there been any Palestinians that have spoken to you about the flotilla and if it actually affected them in any way?
I've spoken to many Palestinians in Gaza, quite a number who live in areas that were close enough to the beach that we were going to land on, who had come down to welcome us that day. Some others who I'm friends with over a longer period of time who live in different areas who wouldn't have been able to meet with us, and then some others who are journalists or who do work in the space, who are all sending the message not only of the importance of the human solidarity, to be in a scenario where you're experiencing a Holocaust and it feels like the whole world is allowing that to happen, at least in terms of governments and big institutions. Like the feeling of being left alone on a human level is so horrific that when people see images of like the Harbour Bridge March or like people get like the student protests at the universities or people gathering in large numbers or coming by sea, it's like it's bringing hope and the feeling that someone is fighting for this to end and for something freer and more peaceful and with more justice to emerge out of that. And it's unanimously been communicated to us that we can't stop. No matter what happens, we can't stop doing this because that is so important. The next level of it, bringing aid and bringing the possibility of breaking open that siege, that illegal siege, is very important as well. And then the third thing is something about, specifically for Palestinians in Gaza, the imagery of the sea. Because in lots of places, humans look to the sky to imagine peace. You're going through horror and you look to the sky. And in the sky, all that comes is bombs. And if you look to the land, all that comes is bombs and tanks with their bombs and their bullets. Somehow looking to the sea, even though Palestinians are constantly killed at sea, and it's horrific what the IOF does to fishing communities, and there's no freedom to access the sea. There's something about the imagery of looking out at the horizon as an expression of hope, and then the idea of people coming in boats to try to break open the siege and try to create a different pathway forward. And contribute in some little, like very small way towards Palestinians liberating themselves and creating a better future. There's something very powerful in that. And we hear that over and over again from Palestinians in Gaza about how important it is that we keep trying.
That's incredible. Very, very well said. And I remember there was a video that I saw of fishermen or just Palestinians trying to fish. And because the IOF is... with their tyranny, doesn't allow them to fish and shoots at them, the flotilla keeping the IOF Navy distracted even for a little bit allowed the Palestinians to actually reel in a whole heap of fish. And that for me was like, it's a very small win, but it's so symbolic of what is actually possible, as you say, if the world was to continue to build up this resistance against what so-called Israel is doing.
Yeah, I was in prison for like 7 days after that, so I didn't see those videos until the week later. But retrospectively, to see that they'd expended so many resources trying to stop us that a lot of people were able to get a catch and to bring in some fish that they hadn't caught for a couple of years. That was a beautiful, beautiful thing.
It's insane. It was. So you've said that we can't stop, right? And you've been obviously Gazans would love to see more people attempting. So. What's the next step? Is the Global Sumud Flotilla, now that the ceasefire has been announced, is it sort of pack your bags up and go home? Or is it?
We're very much working on the next mission.
Okay.
in a very strong way. People say like you're gonna have some time to rest and things, and it's like, you know, there's a lot to build right now to make the next one as powerful and successful as it can be. So that's already in the process. It's a matter of there's two different possibilities that we're working with right now, because the way that the seasons are with the weather on that particular stretch of sea and ocean is safer for smaller ships like the ones that we were using in a certain season. So it's only possible to do the exact same mission with more boats, 100, whatever, in a certain season. So that would have to wait until April, May next year. And in the meantime, if there's a capacity for us to build enough resources to get bigger ships that will be safer for a mission like that, then we'll be doing that as well in the meantime. But there is no way that we will stop the missions until the illegal blockade is finished, until Palestinians control all of the access to the waters around Palestine and are free to welcome whoever they like from the world to enter their country via the sea there. Until that happens, we'll be sailing boats and we'll be attempting to break the siege until we do, inshallah, next time.
Inshallah. I'm going to say, may God allow us to experience that day where we can all go and help rebuild and help, you know, as you say, just give the Palestinians a lot of what, you know, they've been fighting for. Really, the Palestinians are a symbol. And I think this is why, you know, they resonate with so many people, because they are a symbol of that fighting oppression, no matter where you are. And I think you see indigenous people all over the world identifying with Palestinians and, you know, the courage and the resistance that they've shown, especially over the last 2 years. Like, you know, this has been a live streamed genocide that we've seen. And, you know, when the ceasefires announced, they're coming out and they're celebrating, and there's still that love for life, and the hostages that Israel has taken from the Palestinians, that you can see the happiness on their faces. Have you seen some of those videos? Have you been able to catch up on some of that?
I have. I mean, I will be happy for Palestinians in Gaza to celebrate a small reprieve from the horror,
Absolutely.
from the bombs being constantly dropped. Obviously, Israel and the US are not honest brokers in these agreements. In any truce, there's never been a ceasefire. Like, Israel has never ceased fire. They've killed Palestinians every day of every truce. But of course, it's beautiful to see the images of people being able to take a breath, to be able to reunite with loved ones who were taken hostage in Israeli dungeons. Very disappointed that Marwan Barghouti and Ahmed Sadat are not being released. It shows that there's no interest in allowing Palestinians to choose for themselves who is going to be a leader for the society. And it's obvious that the plan is for the genocide to continue. But yeah, it's a beautiful thing to see people having those moments of reprieve finally, and hopefully that can last for as long as possible.
As you say, though, with you know, tyrants like so-called Israel and the US, there, it's you've got to be on your toes, as you say, and the work doesn't stop now that there's a ceasefire announced or whatever. We have to continue to work in every capacity that we have. And in fact, I think, you know, after the last 2 years, more and more eyes are now on Palestine. More and more eyes are now on the suffering of the Palestinians. And I think, like, we need to use every avenue that we have to continue to shine a light on everything that the Palestinians have been going through. Because you speak to a lot of people, and then, like, before you know, October 7, people didn't even know who the Palestinians were. People thought the Palestinians were all, you know, everything was to blame on the Palestinians. And you know, definitely the eyes of the world have been opened.
Absolutely, and it's like it's Palestinian suffering, but it's also the example of Palestinian resistance. It feels like Palestine has always been an expression of humanity, the Palestinian struggle, but it's become the expression of all struggles.
Yes.
It's like the Palestinian struggle encapsulates the climate justice movement,
Yes.
struggles against colonization, decolonial struggles, the struggle for people to have statehood, to be recognized as living from the land that is their land, the struggle, like the migratory struggles of being able to exist on a land in the first place, to have shelter over your head, access to food, the class struggle. Every struggle is encapsulated in Palestine, and it feels like it will be Palestinians that liberate Palestine, but to the extent that the rest of the world can contribute to the uprising in the way that happened with South Africa, that can play a role in the liberation of Palestine. It's like embedding these threads between all of the movements that then gives us the opportunity to liberate the whole world. And it feels like the example of Palestinian resistance is an opportunity for all of us to learn about something more about what it means to be human, what it means to struggle, what it means to build community, and to overcome. And it's a beautiful gift, and we have to step up to that and meet it and honor it by, as you say, by leaning into whatever capacity we have to contribute to that peace and freedom and justice.
So beautifully said. Thank you so much. Look, I could keep talking to you probably for another 3 hours.
Brother, we could speak all night.
Until we could. And honestly, I would love to, but I really want to extend my thank you for giving us your time today. You can follow Surya on Instagram and all these other socials. We'll put the links in the description down below. Please be sure, go check out his page. Please be sure to follow him, but also be sure to like this video and subscribe to this channel, because we will be talking a lot more about all the upcoming work that people like Surya and the organization like the Global Sumud Flotilla will be undertaking. We also go live to do reactions on things that happen. So, for example, when the ceasefire was announced, we went live to give a bit of a view on what the ceasefire means. So please be sure to follow us on all our socials. But also, if you do watch this, please be sure, go to Surya's Instagram and just leave him a message. Just leave him a message of thanks, because it's been lovely to speak to you. Everything that sort of you've done is, it's about centering Palestinians. It's about the Palestinian struggle. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's not about Stand For Palestine. It's not about any organization. This is purely about Palestinians. And truly, I thank you because you embody that. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, brother.
Very quickly, one last message to Australians. If you could give one message to Australians, what would you say in terms of what's happening in Palestine?
I would say that we're in a unique position to be able to put a little bit of effort, a little bit of extra focus and push into our boundaries a little bit to be able to have a very powerful effect on how the future unfolds. We have this opportunity because people who have fought for that opportunity in the past. We have it because of the particular situation we're in Australia, of having enacted a genocide, and because of the dispossession of the people here. We have it because of our histories and how we've ended up here, but it's a unique opportunity. And we have to take that opportunity and do something with it to honor all of the suffering that's ended up with us having that opportunity right now.
Excellent. Wow. Hear that? Make sure you Aussies get out there and do something. Surya, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope we can have you on again, because I think there's still a lot more for us to discuss. But we will end it there. Thank you so much, Surya. We're going to end with a quick Quranic recitation. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Thank you so much for joining us, guys.